You know this feeling. That ache in your chest when you realize nobody really sees you. They look through you, like you're transparent, like your presence changes nothing. And the worst part? You let it happen. For years, you accepted being invisible, always in the background. But the silence that screams inside you is about to transform into something they never expected. Something dangerous. Something inevitable. There's a specific moment in every human life when everything changes. It's like an internal fracture so deep the sound echoes in your bones. Neuroscience calls this neural pattern disruption, when the brain, pushed beyond what it can bear, rewrites its own connections in seconds. You call it the breaking point, the moment you realized being ignored wasn't an accident. It was their choice, a conscious decision to keep you small because your greatness scared them. Pain has a function most people don't understand. When it reaches a critical threshold, the limbic system enters extreme survival mode. That's when pain becomes power. Traumatic neuroplasticity rebuilds your identity, no longer as victim, as predator. You've been here before, in that space between being trampled and deciding nobody will ever touch you again. The person started noticing changes. A calculating assessment of who deserved their energy. Psychologists call it adaptive emotional detachment, but it was inner war. A silent battle between the self everyone knew and the enemy within. That shadowy part dormant for years. Planning. Always planning. Deep down, you know I'm right. The reality is nobody ignored you by accident. They created this. Keeping you invisible was necessary so they could stay visible. Your brilliance would outshine theirs, so they covered you with shadows. But the denser shadows become, the more powerful the light needed to scatter them. Rise from the ashes isn't metaphor. It's biology. It's neuroscience. The person started making different choices. At work, stopped offering free help to those who only took. At home, established boundaries that never existed before. Behavioral psychology calls this extinction through reinforcement removal, but it was silent revenge. The most devastating revenge isn't confrontation, it's indifference. Something fascinating happens when you stop seeking external validation. The reward system starts recalibrating. People who've experienced psychological rebirth show reduced activation in regions associated with social self-awareness. They literally stop caring what others think, not through arrogance, through inner strength. But here's the truth underneath. This transformation has a cost. You can't be reborn without dying first. Change requires massive metabolic energy. New synaptic connections must form. During this process, you'll feel anxiety, confusion. But you felt this in your bones. It's not danger. It's evolution. It's the moment everything changes. Psychologists identify this as shadow self-integration. When you stop repressing dark parts and consciously incorporate them into your identity. Carl Jung argued this integration is essential for true individuation. And the monster they made? It's not a monster. It's just you, whole, unedited, undiluted for anyone's comfort. Researchers discovered people who've experienced significant trauma and emerged stronger show unique brain activity patterns. Simultaneous activation in suffering and reward regions, as if the brain learned to extract growth from pain, strength born in darkness, the ability to look at the hell you crossed and say, it was worth it. Pay attention. This is where everything turns. The person returned to the same places where they used to be invisible. But something fundamental had changed. It was energy. Presence isn't something you do. It's something you are. When you're completely aligned internally, when there's no dissonance between who you are and who you pretend to be, they won't see it coming because real transformation is invisible until it's too late. Humans are programmed to detect changes in social hierarchies. And when someone who occupied the bottom suddenly radiates controlled chaos, instinctive alarms fire. Underestimated too long, now facing the reality that person doesn't need them anymore, doesn't want them, had become who you feared. Self-sufficient, relentless, free. Scars with meaning are the steps of this climb. Each emotional scar taught you something. Each rejection revealed who really matters. They consolidate into something no external circumstance can shake. Unshakable identity. The moment you awaken, when consciousness finally observes its own truth, you become singular, defined, real. You weren't meant to hear this by accident. You're here because your own collapse is near. Maybe it's already begun. Forged in suffering, you learn to read pain like a navigator reads maps. It shows you where work remains. Becoming unstoppable doesn't mean never falling. It means each fall teaches you exactly how much momentum you need to jump even higher. Brains that experienced extreme adversity and recovered show superior neural connectivity. Faster connections between prefrontal cortex and amygdala. Better emotional regulation. Broken but unbreakable isn't just poetic. It's literal. You broke. And reconstructing yourself, you created superior architecture. This is about you. What are you feeling now? Recognition? Hope? Fear? You know this feeling. Maybe you're still at rock bottom, or already climbing, or nearly at the top, understanding that everything changes now. That rise without permission was the only option left. Here's the revelation. You were never weak. You were ignored until dangerous. And this experience forged something extraordinary. Someone who knows the cost of transformation because they paid the full price up front. Someone with beauty and broken pieces because only broken things refract light into complete spectrums. This is the part that changes you. Not when you read these words, but when you finally believe them. They told you to be grateful just to survive, that getting through was enough. But something inside you whispered a different truth. That pain shapes you into something unprecedented, something they never authorized you to become. This is where most people stop. They accept survival as the ceiling when it's actually the foundation. But not you. You sensed that the weight of their judgment wasn't crushing you. It was compressing you into diamond. The neuroscience is undeniable. When your amygdala, that ancient alarm system buried deep in your brain, screams danger during trauma, it doesn't just register threat. It forces your prefrontal cortex, the rational orchestrator, into a brutal negotiation. Most brains surrender, letting fear dictate terms. But some, pushed past breaking, forge new pathways, stronger connections between emotion and reason. Scientists call this functional connectivity enhancement. You call it psychological rebirth. The moment your brain rewired itself not just to survive the darkness, but to weaponize it. Research reveals something extraordinary. 70% of trauma survivors report not just recovery, but transformation. 5 specific domains change completely. Appreciation of life becomes visceral, not theoretical. Relationships deepen through radical empathy. Personal strength crystallizes into unshakable resilience. New possibilities materialize where only walls existed. And spiritual or philosophical frameworks reconstruct entirely. This isn't healing. This is evolution under extreme pressure. Descent and awakening compressed into a single metamorphic event. But here's what they never knew. The type of rumination determines everything. Intrusive thoughts, those uninvited memories that ambush you at 3 in the morning, they corrode. But deliberate rumination, conscious examination of your trauma with intention, that builds. 2 domains explode with growth through this process. Relationships transform as you develop supernatural ability to read pain in others, and perception of new possibilities expands exponentially because you've already survived the impossible. What could possibly frighten you now? Your identity isn't fixed. That's the lie they sold you to keep you manageable. Identity is fluid, constantly negotiating between who you were and who circumstances demand you become. The moment you awaken to this truth, phase 1 begins. Awareness. That gnawing sensation that something fundamental misaligns. You've outgrown the container they built for you. Your job title feels like a costume. Your relationships echo with performative hollow sounds. This discomfort isn't weakness. It's your nervous system screaming that emotional survival requires immediate transformation. Phase 2 is exploration, and it's terrifying. Because examining your true values means admitting the ones you've been performing were never yours. Tools help. Journaling forces you to confront patterns you've been avoiding. Personality frameworks reveal architecture you didn't know existed within you. But the real work happens in silence. When you ask yourself the question that changes everything. Who would I be if nobody was watching? If approval didn't matter? If fear didn't vote? That answer, raw and unfiltered, that's the self you forgot clawing its way to the surface. The amygdala-prefrontal cortex relationship isn't just biology, it's prophecy. When these regions achieve optimal connectivity, emotional regulation becomes second nature. You don't suppress negative emotions, you process them in real time and extract data. The VMPFC, ventromedial prefrontal cortex, generates and regulates negative emotion through constant dialogue with your amygdala. Strong connectivity here predicts something remarkable: individual differences in successful emotion regulation. Translation: some people aren't just born resilient. They build resilience through repeated exposure to emotional ambiguity and choosing, consciously, to integrate rather than fracture. Post-traumatic growth requires specific personality traits to fully manifest. Openness to experience, because transformation demands you abandon certainty. Agreeableness, not as submission but as capacity to maintain relationships during your darkest hours. And conscientiousness, the ability to self-regulate when every instinct screams chaos. High conscientiousness correlates with superior problem-solving and cognitive restructuring. You don't just survive the trauma, you dismantle it, study its components, and rebuild yourself using its raw materials. Forged in suffering isn't metaphor, it's methodology. Neuroticism is the enemy of growth. Individuals who respond to threat with persistent negative emotion, who can't integrate self-discrepancy, they remain trapped. Not because they're weak, but because growth requires you to sit in discomfort without reactivity. To observe your fear from a distance and ask, what is this teaching me? The moment you reframe trauma from something that happened to you into something that happened for you, neural pathways ignite. Not positivity bypassing the pain, but extracting meaning from the wreckage. Collective processing amplifies individual growth. When you share your emotional experience with others who've endured similar darkness, something chemical happens. Collective solidarity creates belonging that individual healing can't touch. You realize silent battles aren't actually silent. They're a frequency only certain people can hear. And when you find your frequency tribe, growth accelerates exponentially. Community engagement following disaster doesn't just help others, it completes your own transformation. Because teaching someone else to navigate their darkness requires you to master yours. You know this feeling, that strange cocktail of devastation and electricity, where everything you thought was solid revealed itself as vapor. Your career, your relationship, your understanding of who you are, gone. And in that void, that terrifying, unlimited space, new possibilities emerged. Not because you wanted them, because survival demanded invention. Identity transformation unfolds in phases you can't rush. After awareness and exploration comes integration, where you test new versions of yourself in real environments. You set boundaries that previously seemed impossible. You speak truths that used to strangle you silent. You walk away from people and situations your old self would have clung to desperately. And each small act of alignment, each choice that honors the truth that burns inside you, rewrites your neural code. Your brain literally reorganizes around your authentic self. The final phase is embodiment. When the new identity isn't something you perform, it's something you are. Your actions align with your values automatically. Decision-making becomes effortless because you've eliminated internal conflict. You experience what researchers call unbreakable core, not because nothing can hurt you, but because you've already survived your worst fear, yourself without pretense, and discovered you're not just acceptable, you're unstoppable. 70% experience growth, but growth isn't guaranteed. It requires deliberate cognitive processing, willingness to sit with intrusive thoughts until they become deliberate examination, courage to share your darkness when isolation feels safer, and most difficult, releasing the identity you've performed for so long it feels like skin. That old self has to die, not metaphorically, actually die. Its neural patterns pruned, its behavioral loops extinguished, its fear-based decision trees uprooted completely. This is where everything turns. You're not reading this by accident. You're in one of those phases right now. Maybe awareness, where discomfort finally exceeded your tolerance for pretending. Maybe exploration, where you're discovering values you didn't know you had. Or integration, where you're testing who you're becoming in real time. Wherever you are, understand this. The shift inside you isn't random. It's inner resurrection. Your brain responding to unbearable pressure by becoming something categorically different, something dangerous in the most beautiful sense. Dangerous because you can't be controlled anymore, can't be diminished, can't be convinced you're anything less than what your suffering forged you into. Nobody prepared you for what happens after. After the crisis passes, after the worst moment ends, after you survive what should have destroyed you. They focus on damage, on symptoms, on what's broken. But something else is happening simultaneously. Something they don't have language for because it contradicts everything trauma theory taught them. You're not just healing. You're becoming who you feared. Someone categorically different than who entered the fire. Richard Tedeschi and Lawrence Calhoun documented this phenomenon in the mid-1990s. They called it post-traumatic growth, and it shattered assumptions about human psychology. 89% of trauma survivors report at least one domain of profound positive change, not resilience, which is simply returning to baseline, growth, exceeding who you were before catastrophe found you. This isn't about silver linings or gratitude bypassing your pain. It's about the power you denied finally manifesting because circumstances gave you no other option. 5 specific domains transform completely. Appreciation of life becomes visceral, not intellectual. You don't think about mortality, you feel it in every breath. Relationships deepen through radical empathy. Having walked through hell gives you supernatural ability to recognize pain in others. Personal strength crystallizes into something unshakable. You've already survived your worst fear. What could possibly break you now? New possibilities materialize where only walls existed. The old you saw limitations. The forged you sees opportunities everywhere. And spiritual or philosophical frameworks reconstruct entirely. Your understanding of existence, purpose, meaning, none of it survives intact. But here's the silence before the storm. They don't explain. Growth isn't automatic. 70% experience it, but 30% don't. The difference? It's not the trauma itself. It's how you process the aftermath. 2 types of rumination determine everything. Intrusive rumination, those unwanted memories that ambush you, they corrode. But deliberate rumination, conscious examination of what happened with intention to extract meaning, that builds. You're not ready for this truth. Your worst moments contain your greatest lessons, but only if you have courage to study them. The neuroscience reveals why this works. Trauma doesn't just damage the brain, it forces reorganization. Your amygdala, that ancient alarm system, becomes hyperactive during trauma. It floods your system with stress hormones, cortisol and adrenaline, rewiring neural pathways in real time. Most people try to suppress this, medicating away the discomfort. But those who lean into it, who deliberately process rather than avoid, they discover something extraordinary. The same mechanisms that create post-traumatic stress can create post-traumatic growth. It depends entirely on whether you integrate or fragment. Integration requires specific personality traits, openness to experience, because growth demands you abandon certainty about who you are. You can't grow while clinging to your old identity. Agreeableness, not as submission but as capacity to maintain relationships during your darkest hours. Isolation kills growth, and conscientiousness, the ability to self-regulate when every instinct screams chaos. High conscientiousness correlates with superior problem-solving and cognitive restructuring. You don't just survive trauma, you dismantle it, study its components, and rebuild the self using its raw materials. Neuroticism is growth's enemy. Individuals who respond to threat with persistent negative emotion, who can't tolerate self-discrepancy, they remain trapped. Not because they're weak, but because growth requires sitting in discomfort without reactivity. Observing your fear from distance and asking, what is this teaching me? The moment you reframe trauma from something that happened to you into something that happened for you, Neural pathways ignite. Not positivity bypassing pain, but extracting the truth that burns from wreckage. Crystal Park proposed stress-related growth. Joseph and Lindley developed adversarial growth theory. All describe the same phenomenon from different angles. When traumatic information contradicts your existing worldview, you face a choice. Integrate it into current beliefs, or modify beliefs based on new reality. If you positively accommodate trauma-related information and assimilate prior beliefs, psychological growth explodes. You don't just recover, you evolve. Community amplifies this process exponentially. Collective processing creates belonging that individual healing can't touch. When you share your emotional experience with others who've endured similar darkness, chemical changes occur. You realize the enemy within isn't actually your enemy. It's the part of you that kept you alive. And finding your frequency tribe, people who hear what you've been through without judgment, accelerates transformation. Community engagement following disaster doesn't just help others, it completes your own metamorphosis. Because teaching someone else to navigate their darkness requires you to master yours. The updated model Tedeschi and Calhoun released in 2006 identifies key components. Characteristics of the person and challenging circumstances interact. Management of emotional distress determines trajectory. Rumination type, intrusive versus deliberate, creates divergent outcomes. Self-disclosure accelerates growth. Sociocultural influences shape interpretation. Narrative development allows meaning-making. And life wisdom emerges as the final integration. Deep down, you know I'm right. You've felt this yourself. That strange paradox where your worst experience also became your most transformative. Where devastation and electricity coexisted. Everything you thought was solid revealed itself as vapor. Your career, your relationship, your understanding of reality, gone. And in that void, that terrifying, unlimited space, courage in the dark emerged. Not because you wanted it, because survival demanded invention. Positive psychology embraced post-traumatic growth in the late 1990s. Before then, psychology focused almost exclusively on pathology. What's wrong with you? What's broken? What needs fixing? But Martin Seligman and Mihaly Csikszentmihalyi launched a movement toward understanding positive outcomes. Researchers initially called this phenomenon different names. Positive life changes, growing in aftermath of suffering, positive adaptation to trauma. But when Tedeschi and Calhoun created the Post-Traumatic Growth Inventory in 1996, the framework crystallized. The PTGI measures growth across those 5 domains: appreciation of life, relating to others, personal strength, new possibilities, spiritual change. And here's what's critical. Presence of growth doesn't rule out simultaneous distress. You can be growing and suffering at the same time. They're not mutually exclusive. In fact, the struggle itself generates growth. Without psychological distress, without that brutal confrontation with mortality and meaning, transformation doesn't occur. This is about you, not theory, not statistics, you. What changed after your crisis? What parts of yourself died that needed to die? What emerged that you didn't know existed inside you? These aren't rhetorical questions. Growth requires conscious examination, deliberate rumination, looking directly at what happened and asking, who did this make me? Resilience brings you back to baseline. Growth takes you beyond. Rise without permission isn't about ignoring damage. It's about using wreckage as foundation for something unprecedented. You don't return to who you were. That person couldn't have survived this. You become someone new, someone forged in suffering, someone with unbreakable core because you've already been broken and reconstructed yourself consciously, deliberately, with intention. The world expects you to return to who you were before. They measure healing by how closely you resemble your old self. But something fundamental changed that they can't see. You don't want to go back. That person couldn't have survived this. The one standing here now? They created this through pressure they never anticipated would forge something so dangerous. Post-traumatic growth isn't temporary. Research tracking cancer survivors reveals transformation persisting even years after the traumatic event. 4 years post-diagnosis, individuals still report profound changes across all 5 domains. Appreciation of life doesn't fade with time. It intensifies, because you've internalized mortality not as abstract concept but as lived reality. Every moment carries weight now that others can't feel. The longitudinal data reveals something critical. Growth isn't linear. Fatigue, pain, and emotional distress predict long-term transformation, but not in straightforward ways. Log-transformed relationships suggest the association curves. Early moderate distress correlates with higher growth. Too little suffering doesn't disrupt your worldview enough to force reconstruction. Too much overwhelms cognitive processing capacity. But that middle zone, where you're broken enough to need rebuilding, but functional enough to direct the reconstruction, that's the moment everything changes. Age and gender influence trajectory. Younger individuals experience higher growth because trauma disrupts life plans more profoundly. Female survivors report greater transformation, not weakness, courage in the dark. Women tend toward deliberate rumination and social disclosure, both critical mechanisms for growth. They process trauma communally, rather than in isolation. And that community engagement, that willingness to share your darkness and hear others, amplifies transformation exponentially. Chemotherapy predicts higher growth. The physical brutality, the visible evidence of fragmented mind reassembling itself, creates undeniable proof of survival. You can't pretend you weren't broken when your body bears scars. That honesty, that inability to minimize what you endured, forces authentic integration rather than superficial coping. Military veterans demonstrate the long-term sustainability of growth. Post-traumatic growth-oriented training increased transformation measures by 54% from baseline to endpoint. But here's what matters most. 18-month follow-up revealed all significant changes maintained. This isn't temporary positivity. It's permanent neural restructuring. Rebuilding the self doesn't mean patching the old structure. It means constructing entirely new architecture using materials your suffering refined. Amy Canavello describes growth as reconstructive. Trauma shatters your worldview completely. Core beliefs about safety, fairness, meaning, they disintegrate. And growth emerges from deliberately reassembling those pieces into new patterns. You don't restore the original image. You create something unprecedented. Beauty in broken pieces isn't metaphor. It's the literal process of finding configurations the intact version could never achieve. Anne Wilde exemplifies this. Born with congenital spine condition, survived multiple traumas from disability and medical procedures, competed in 5 Paralympics, earned an OBE, works as occupational therapist. Her complications may prove fatal in coming years, but she describes enormous grit and determination to integrate adversity, not despite her trauma, because of it. Pain shapes you into configurations impossible without pressure. But here's the truth underneath researchers discovered. Perceived growth doesn't always correlate with measurable psychological transformation. Participants reporting positive change using the post-traumatic growth inventory didn't necessarily show improvement in objective psychological measures. This discrepancy matters. Some people claim growth that hasn't actually occurred. Defense mechanism, not transformation. Real growth requires more than believing you've changed. It demands behavioral, cognitive, and emotional evidence visible to others and measurable through time. Additionally, perceived growth sometimes correlates with worse outcomes. Soldiers reporting greater post-traumatic growth 5 months after returning from Iraq deployment showed worse PTSD symptoms at study's end. Not because growth itself damages, but because claiming growth prematurely, before authentic processing completes, creates internal contradiction. You're performing transformation while still fragmenting internally. That dissonance intensifies suffering. Deep down, you know I'm right. Real growth feels different than performed growth. Authentic transformation doesn't require announcement. Others sense it in your energy, your presence, your unshakable identity. You don't tell people you've changed. They notice something fundamental shifted and ask what happened. That's how you identify genuine growth. It radiates without effort. Subdimensions vary in intensity. Appreciation of life consistently shows highest growth, because mortality becomes visceral. You don't think about death abstractly anymore. You feel life's fragility in your bones. Spiritual change shows least pronounced growth for most. Religious frameworks either strengthen dramatically or collapse entirely. Middle ground rarely exists. You either find deeper meaning in existing beliefs or abandon them completely for new philosophical structures. Personal strength transformation manifests as ruthless growth. You discovered reserves you didn't know existed. That latent courage, emotional endurance tested beyond what seemed survivable. It fostered empowerment and self-efficacy that future challenges can't shake. Reflecting on how you adapted to trauma increases confidence, not arrogance. Empirical certainty that you can handle whatever comes. Relationships deepen through capacity to establish more durable connections. You become more tolerant, sensitive, compassionate. Not because you're trying to be a good person, because having walked through hell gives you supernatural ability to recognize pain in others. You see beneath performances, detect suffering people hide, and that empathy creates bonds impossible before you're breaking. New possibilities materialize where walls existed. Different value frame emerges. Old limitations reveal themselves as self-imposed boundaries you accepted without examination. Now you question everything. If you survived that, what else is possible? This openness to reimagining your life trajectory, that's reclaiming your power. Nobody gave permission. You seized it because trauma proved the old rules were fiction. Information matters more than most realize. Poor knowledge about fatigue associated with less growth. Education correlates positively with transformation. Understanding what's happening to you psychologically and neurologically during trauma processing makes growth more accessible. That's why psychoeducation accelerates healing, not because knowledge erases pain, because comprehension provides framework for integration. This is about you. What domains transformed most intensely? Where do you feel strongest growth? Appreciation of life probably increased viscerally. Personal strength crystallized into certainty. Relationships either deepened dramatically or ended completely. New possibilities emerged you couldn't have imagined before, and your philosophical framework, either shattered and rebuilt or reinforced through fire. Growth and distress coexist. You can transform while suffering simultaneously. They're not mutually exclusive. In fact, some research suggests growth may reduce long-term post-traumatic stress symptoms, not by eliminating pain, by providing meaning that makes the pain bearable. Scars with meaning don't hurt less. They hurt purposefully. And purpose transforms suffering from senseless cruelty into forging process. Years from now, this growth persists. The person you're becoming through this fire, that's permanent. Not because trauma defines you, because your response to trauma created someone unbreakable, someone who knows the cost of transformation intimately, someone with strength born in darkness that daylight dwellers can't comprehend. They want you to stay in the light, to perform goodness, present the acceptable version, keep everything pleasant and digestible. But the shadows you've hidden contain more power than your curated persona ever could. Carl Jung understood what most therapists still refuse to acknowledge. Your darkness isn't something to overcome. It's unrealized potential waiting for permission to exist. Shadow integration is the process of bringing disowned parts of yourself back into consciousness and making them a part of you. Each disowned part, once integrated, makes you less fragmented, less anxious, less internal tension. You've been walking around incomplete, wondering why you feel hollow despite checking all the boxes. Because you excommunicated half of who you are, labeled it dangerous, inappropriate, and unacceptable. And in doing so, you cut yourself off from the very traits that would make you unstoppable. Jung called people who reject their shadow one-sided. That's most of humanity. Cut off from aspects of themselves, performing personas that receive approval while their authentic nature withers in exile. Shadow work resolves this one-sidedness through two stages. First, get to know your shadow. Bring this psychic material to awareness. Second, Integrate the shadow. Make this material part of you. Simple to describe, brutal to execute. The main goals are threefold. Harmonize the opposing tensions within the psyche, become less one-sided, build consciousness, become more aware of who you actually are, and move towards psychic wholeness, returning home to your true self. The benefits of this inner process are profound, but most people never begin. They sense the truth that burns beneath their performance and choose ignorance. Greater internal strength emerges first, often called confidence or high self-esteem, but it's deeper than that. With shadow work, insecurities and neurotic tendencies fall away. You drop the need to defend your self-identity, that constructed persona you've been performing. Your natural confidence returns and you become okay with yourself, self-accepting. As you integrate your shadow side and come to terms with your darker half, you see yourself more clearly. You become infinitely stronger, more grounded, secure, fully human, and whole. Clearer perception of yourself follows. In seeing others and yourself as you are, without distortions brought on by self-deception, you have a clearer lens to view the world. As you integrate your shadow, you approach your authentic self, which gives you more realistic assessment of who you are. You won't perceive yourself as too great or too small. When you're genuinely self-aware, you can assess your environment more accurately from a state of neutrality. You see others and evaluate situations with greater clarity and understanding. Psychological integration and maturity become possible. As long as you deny the shadow archetype and repress certain parts of yourself, you will not experience wholeness, integration, and internal unity. How can you feel wholeness with a divided mind? Developmental research suggests less than 5% ever reach mature psychological development. Most people remain perpetually one-sided, fragmented, performing. You know this feeling, that internal war between who you show the world and who you actually are. What gets repressed into shadow? All that is deemed bad or immoral by society, all that is frowned upon by family or peers, all the traits that when initially expressed were ridiculed, shunned, or met with punishment. Your aggression, your sexuality, your ambition, your desire for power, every natural impulse that made adults uncomfortable, every authentic response that didn't fit their narrative. You learn to exile these parts to survive. But survival isn't living. Jung stressed an individual's proper goal is wholeness, not perfection. The path to greater character, to more effectual approach to life, lies in integrating those elements of your psyche that for too long have been repressed and denied. Your unconscious shadow side contains everything you need to become formidable. But conventional wisdom warns that your dark side consists of wickedness you need to overcome. That's the lie keeping you manageable. The connection between shadow integration and development of greater character becomes clear when you understand Jung's assertion. Integration of the shadow leads to self-reliance, as denying your shadow only renders you prone to possession by its destructive side. Integrating your shadow into conscious personality is crucial for well-being. Deep down, you know I'm right. Every time you act against your nature to please someone else, you feel the fracture. Take aggression as example. Many desperately need to integrate this shadow characteristic. To initiate integration, seek safe, controlled, and productive outlets where you start acting with more aggression. Find competitive sport, martial art, or exercise regime whereby you reconnect to aggressive instincts. But also work on becoming more assertive in behavior, more decisive in choices, more declarative and protective of personal boundaries, more inclined to stand your ground when tested by co-workers, family, or peers. Jung explained integration cannot take place unless one can admit the tendencies bound up with the shadow and allow them some measure of realization, tempered with necessary criticism. As you undergo this process, be careful not to overcompensate. Controlled chaos, not destruction. Deliberate application of traits you've been suppressing, not reactive explosion. Extrapolate this integration method to other shadow characteristics, those tied to sexuality, creativity, ambition, desire for power. You'll notice your personality transform dramatically. You become more grounded, more secure in your skin, more independent in moral judgments, more courageous and self-reliant. In integrating your shadow, you move toward ideal of psychological wholeness. And this is the ideal that produces greatness of character sorely missing in modern world. Erich Neumann observed the acceptance of the shadow involves growth in depth into ground of one's own being. A new depth, rootedness, and stability is born. Pay attention. This is where everything turns. You're not healing. You're becoming complete. Reclaiming exiled parts and discovering they weren't evil. They were powerful. The shadow self represents a cluster of various parts hidden within your psyche. Only from your center can you get to know these parts. If one of these parts is blended with you, it will hijack the process. You'll be judgmental, critical, or confused, inhibiting your ability to observe and integrate your shadow. Before working with shadow archetype, you want to be calm, clear, and neutral in your center. Integrating shadow takes time and patience. It requires many confrontations with your ego. As each psychic tension gets resolved, you become more balanced and okay with yourself. The value of this okayness is difficult to express in words, but you'll know it when you feel it. That internal silence where nothing is at war anymore. Shadow integration involves ego confrontations. You dismantle your current conscious self-identity to learn about and integrate your shadow. Do this by deliberately challenging your self-identity using various shadow work techniques. Journaling, active imagination, working with dreams, examining your projections. Every person who triggers intense emotional response in you reveals something about your shadow. They're holding up a mirror. Once you identify original sources of psychological triggers, repressed fear, pain, aggression, only then can you begin to heal and integrate those wounded parts. Integration means you cease rejecting parts of your personality and find ways to bring them forward into everyday life. You accept your shadows and seek to unlock wisdom they contain. Fear becomes opportunity for courage. Pain is catalyst for strength and resilience. Aggression transmutes into warrior-like passion. This wisdom informs your actions, decisions, and interactions with others. One aspect of integrating shadow self is healing psychological wounds from early childhood and beyond. As you embark on this work, you understand much of your shadow is a result of being hurt and trying to protect yourself from re-experiencing that hurt. You can accept what happened, acknowledge you didn't deserve the hurt, that these things weren't your fault, and reclaim those lost pieces to move back into wholeness. Jung points out you can't correct undesirable behaviors until you deal with them head on. The shadow self acts out like disobedient child until all aspects of personality are acknowledged and integrated. Many spiritual philosophies denounce the shadow as something to overcome and transcend. Jung insists the true aim is not to defeat the shadow self, but to incorporate it with the rest of personality. This is about you. When you work to heal and integrate your shadow, you stop living so reactively and unconsciously. You stop hurting others less. You build trust in relationships, and people whose lives you touch open themselves to others. Even random acts of kindness to strangers increase likelihood they'll be kind to strangers in turn. You hold within you power to catalyze ripple that will vibrate through countless lives. The moment you awaken to your shadow, everything changes. You're not becoming something new. You're becoming whole. Every rejected part returning home. Every exiled impulse finding its rightful place. Broken but unbreakable isn't about surviving damage. It's about integrating fractures into superior architecture. Someone with beauty in broken pieces because you stopped pretending you were never shattered. Now you understand the mechanism. Post-traumatic growth and shadow integration aren't separate processes. They're the same transformation viewed from different angles. Trauma shatters your persona, exposing what you've been hiding, and in that exposure lies opportunity. The revelation isn't that you survived. It's that what you thought would destroy you actually completed you. Traditional therapy treats symptoms, reduces distress, manages behaviors, returns you to functional baseline. But spiritual shadow work integrated with trauma processing goes deeper. It recognizes your struggles contain soul wisdom. That pain shapes you not randomly, but purposefully. Your shadow holds material needed for growth. Your trauma forced confrontation with parts you exiled. Shadow integration achieves 3 critical outcomes: increased self-awareness, a deeper understanding of your strengths and weaknesses, improved relationships through enhanced ability to understand others and yourself, and personal growth, greater authenticity, creativity, fulfillment. These mirror exactly the 5 domains of post-traumatic growth: appreciation of life, relationship depth, personal strength, new possibilities, spiritual transformation. The connection becomes undeniable. Jung's integration of shadow, those hidden darker aspects, echoes today's concept of post-traumatic growth. Confronting adversity leads to greater self-awareness and resilience. Trauma doesn't just damage, it forces integration of parts you've been avoiding. They created this by keeping you fragmented. Your suffering reunited you. Methods overlap completely. Journaling about thoughts, feelings, experiences gains insights into shadow. Meditation and mindfulness help observe without judgment. Dream analysis reveals hidden aspects. Therapy provides guidance throughout integration. These exact practices facilitate post-traumatic growth. Deliberate rumination, conscious examination with intention to extract meaning. Processing trauma and shadow simultaneously. You know this feeling. When trauma struck, it didn't just hurt. It revealed. Parts of yourself you'd been suppressing suddenly became impossible to ignore. Your aggression, your power, your refusal to accept what others demanded. Trauma gave permission for these exiled aspects to emerge, not as dysfunction, as integration. Benefits of shadow integration include transforming anger into power and strength, transmuting grief into deep connection with self and others, turning fear into insight and understanding, finding compassion, empathy, acceptance. These aren't separate from post-traumatic growth outcomes. They're identical. Both processes achieve emotional health through integration of disowned parts. Ignoring shadow causes self-sabotage, emotional distress, strained relationships through unconscious projections. Repressed emotions manifest as anxiety, trauma, mental health issues. But integrating shadow through recognizing and embracing repressed emotions fosters self-awareness, self-acceptance, emotional equilibrium. This exactly parallels trauma recovery. You can't heal by avoiding what happened, only by integrating it. This is about you. Your trauma wasn't random cruelty. It was forced integration. The universe, circumstances, other people, they shattered your persona, exposed your shadow. And now you face choice. Reassemble the old fragmented self, or integrate everything into something whole. Becoming unstoppable requires choosing integration. Broken but unbreakable means using fractures to build superior architecture. You've spent your entire life being told who to be. Parents, teachers, society. They handed you a script and expected flawless performance. Be polite, be agreeable, be convenient. Suppress anything that makes others uncomfortable. And you obeyed. For years, you buried your authentic impulses beneath layers of acceptable behavior. But the silence that screams inside you, that's every exiled part demanding to come home. What they never told you is that wholeness requires darkness. Jung understood this when he developed shadow psychology. Your shadow isn't evil. It's power you were told to hide. Aggression, ambition, sexuality, rage, desire for dominance. Every natural impulse that threatened their control got labeled dangerous and exiled to your unconscious. And there it festered, growing stronger in darkness while your conscious persona withered from pretending. Integration begins with recognition. You can't reclaim what you refuse to see. Start by observing your emotional triggers. Every person who provokes intense reaction in you reveals something about your shadow. That coworker whose assertiveness infuriates you. You've repressed your own aggression. That stranger whose confidence seems arrogant. You've exiled your power. Deep down, you know I'm right. The intensity of your reaction directly correlates to how thoroughly you've disowned that trait. Next comes acceptance without judgment. This is where most people fail. They identify shadow material and immediately try to eliminate it. But shadow work isn't about destruction, it's integration. Those aggressive impulses, Channel them into assertiveness, boundary setting, protective instincts. That sexual energy you've been suppressing, reclaim it as life force, creativity, passion. Pain becomes power when you stop fighting yourself and start directing those energies consciously. Integration requires daily practice. Journal about parts of yourself you've rejected. What qualities did you learn were unacceptable? When did you first exile them? What would happen if you allowed them measured expression? Meditation helps you observe shadow impulses without reactivity. You notice the anger rising, and instead of suppressing it, you study it. Where does it want to go? What is it protecting? What truth is it revealing? Dreams provide direct access to shadow material. Your unconscious communicates through symbols when your conscious mind sleeps. That recurring nightmare about being chased, you're running from yourself. The pursuer is your disowned power trying to catch you. Stop running, turn around and ask what it wants. The answer will terrify and liberate you simultaneously. Active imagination allows dialogue with shadow parts. Visualize the rejected aspect as separate entity. Give it form, voice, permission to speak. Ask what it needs, why it exists, what wisdom it holds. Listen without judgment. You'll discover these exiled parts aren't saboteurs. They're protectors operating with outdated information. Your aggression emerged to defend you when you were powerless. Your fear developed to keep you safe in genuinely dangerous circumstances. Thank them, update them, integrate them consciously. You've been here before, sensing something fundamental was wrong. That internal fracture, that constant tension between who you show the world and who you actually are. Shadow integration resolves this split. Not by eliminating darkness, but by bringing it into relationship with light. Controlled chaos emerges when you direct shadow energies rather than suppress them. The transformation is permanent. Once you integrate shadow material, you can't unknow yourself. Your relationships deepen because you stop projecting. Your confidence solidifies because it's rooted in wholeness, not performance. Your creativity explodes because you've reclaimed energy previously spent maintaining the split. And your presence, they won't see it coming because integrated individuals radiate power that fragmented people can't comprehend. This isn't healing. This is becoming who you feared. The version of yourself too powerful, too authentic, too uncontrollable for those who needed you small. The moment you awaken to your shadow, you understand why they work so hard to keep you fragmented. Your wholeness threatens their system. Your integration proves their rules were fiction. Your transformation gives others permission to reclaim their own exiled parts. This is about you. Which parts have you been hiding? What impulses do you judge harshest in others? Those are your signposts. Follow them back to yourself. Reclaim what you exiled. Integrate what you've been avoiding. Because broken but unbreakable means accepting every fracture and building superior architecture from complete materials. Someone with beauty in broken pieces because you stopped performing wholeness and became it. The practices aren't complicated, but they demand something most people refuse to give. Honest confrontation with parts they've spent lifetimes avoiding. Shadow integration requires courage. Not because the work is dangerous, but because truth destroys comfortable lies you've been living. You know this feeling. That resistance rising when you sense you're about to discover something about yourself that changes everything. Start with recognition through journaling. Every morning, write about your emotional triggers from the previous day. Who provoked you? What did they do? More importantly, what quality in them caused your reaction? Your coworker's assertiveness, your friend's confidence, that stranger's apparent selfishness. Write it all without censoring. Then ask the critical question, what does my reaction reveal about me? This isn't intellectual exercise. It's archaeological dig into your psyche, uncovering what you buried. Dream analysis provides direct access to shadow material your conscious mind guards against. Keep a journal beside your bed. The moment you wake, before your rational mind organizes the chaos, write everything you remember. Don't interpret yet, just record. Later, examine recurring symbols. That figure chasing you represents disowned power pursuing you. The house with hidden rooms symbolizes unexplored parts of your psyche. The monster under the bed is your rejected aggression, Your unconscious speaks in metaphor because your conscious mind would reject direct communication. Meditation with focused attention on shadow material. Find quiet space, close your eyes, center yourself. Then deliberately summon a person who triggers intense emotional response. Visualize them clearly. Feel the reaction rising in your body. Instead of pushing it away, lean into it. Where do you feel it physically? Chest, throat, stomach. Breathe into that sensation. Ask it what it wants to tell you. Sometimes memories surface, sometimes just raw emotion. Let it move through you without resistance. This is emotional survival training, learning to sit with discomfort until it reveals its wisdom. Active imagination creates dialogue with shadow parts. Enter meditative state and visualize inner sanctuary, somewhere you feel completely safe. A forest clearing, empty room, mountain peak, anywhere. Then invite a shadow aspect to appear. Give it form, let it materialize however it wants. Don't control the process. Ask it, what do you want me to know? Listen without judgment as it responds. You might hear words, see images, just sense emotional information. Your shadow is an enemy. Its protector operating with outdated instructions from childhood trauma. Thank it for keeping you safe. Then explain circumstances have changed and ask how you can work together now. Body-based practices access shadow material stored in somatic memory. Trauma doesn't just live in your mind. It embeds in your tissues, your nervous system, your cellular structure. Yoga, breathwork, intuitive dance, somatic shaking, all bypass intellectual defenses. As you move energy through your body, suppressed emotions surface. Tears, rage, grief, terror. They've been waiting years for permission to release. Don't analyze during the practice. Just allow. Cry if you need to. Scream into a pillow. Shake violently, whatever your body demands. Pain becomes power when you stop trapping it and start metabolizing it. The 3-2-1 process Ken Wilber developed systematically moves shadow material from projection to integration. First, identify someone who triggers you and describe them in third person, id language. They are selfish, aggressive, weak, arrogant, whatever quality provokes you. Next, shift to second person, you language. Visualize them and speak directly. You are selfish. You make me feel small. You trigger my insecurity. Feel the emotional charge. Finally, shift to first person, I language. I am selfish. I am aggressive. I am weak. This is the moment of integration, owning what you've been projecting. It feels like death because your constructed identity shatters. But the moment you awaken to your wholeness, the relief is immediate. Integration requires two-way attention. Part of your awareness focuses on the shadow feeling itself, examining its qualities, textures, emotional valence. The other part observes your mind responding to the shadow material. Notice resistance arising. Notice judgments forming. Notice the urge to escape back into distraction, but stay present. This dual awareness prevents you from being overwhelmed by shadow material, while ensuring you actually process it, rather than dissociating. Interrogate your shadow through specific questions. Why did I reject this part of myself? What happened when I first expressed this quality naturally? Who punished me for being this way? What would my life look like if I integrated this trait consciously? The answers reveal the origin of your fracture and the path to wholeness. Your aggression got exiled because expressing anger as a child resulted in punishment. Your power got rejected because adults felt threatened when you took up space. Your sexuality got shamed because religious frameworks labeled desire as sinful. None of this was about protecting you. It was about controlling you. Ownership is the critical transition. After interrogation, you consciously claim the shadow in first-person language. I am aggressive, and that's a strength I can channel into protection and assertion. I am selfish, and that means I value myself enough to establish boundaries. I am manipulative, and that's social intelligence I can use ethically. Reframing isn't denial. It's recognizing that every shadow trait contains power when integrated rather than repressed. Forgiveness releases the past's hold on your present. You've identified the shadow, interrogated its origins, owned it consciously. Now forgive everyone involved, including yourself. Your parents did their best with their consciousness level. Society operates from collective shadow, perpetuating dysfunction unconsciously. And you survived by fragmenting. There's nothing to forgive, really, just patterns to release. This isn't spiritual bypassing. It's pragmatic recognition that clinging to resentment only maintains your imprisonment. Self-compassion completes the integration process. Where judgment existed, offer love. The parts you rejected deserved acceptance. They were never evil, just young, scared, trying to keep you safe. Hold them with tenderness. Speak to them as you would to a frightened child. I see you. I accept you. You're safe now. We don't have to hide anymore. This internal reconciliation transforms your external reality. People sense the shift. Your energy changes. Controlled chaos replaces suppressed desperation. Daily integration makes this permanent. Notice triggers in real time. When defensiveness arises during conversation, pause, take conscious breath. Ask yourself, what shadow part is requesting attention right now? That's shadow work outside formal practice. Living with awareness that every emotional reaction contains information about your disowned self. Over weeks and months, patterns emerge. The unconscious becomes conscious, and you become whole. This is about you. Which practice calls to you? Journaling, dream work, meditation, active imagination, body practices, 3-2-1 process. Start with 1. Practice daily. Be patient. Integration isn't linear. Some days you'll feel complete, other days fragmented again. That's normal. Becoming unstoppable means continuing the work, especially when it's uncomfortable. Because the power you denied lives in exactly those uncomfortable places you've been avoiding. And reclaiming your power requires you finally go there, stay there, and integrate what you find. You've learned the theory, understood the mechanism, identified the practices, but integration only happens through consistent application. Shadow work is an intellectual exercise you complete and forget. It's daily practice that transforms your entire relationship with yourself and reality. You know this feeling. Knowing what you should do versus actually doing it. That gap between awareness and embodiment. Start each morning with shadow check-in. Before you reach for your phone, before you engage with external demands, sit in silence for 10 minutes. Light a candle if that helps create ritual space. Close your eyes and scan your internal landscape. What emotions are present? Where do you feel tension in your body? What thoughts are you avoiding? Don't judge what arises. Simply observe with curiosity. This conscious witnessing prevents shadow material from hijacking your day unconsciously. Throughout your day, practice real-time shadow recognition. Someone cuts you off in traffic and rage erupts. That's shadow material. Instead of reacting automatically, pause. Take 3 conscious breaths. Ask yourself, what part of me is asking to be seen right now? Maybe the rage connects to childhood powerlessness. Maybe it reveals your suppressed aggression demanding healthier outlet. You won't always have time for deep processing in the moment. But that pause, that split second of conscious awareness before reaction, that's where transformation begins. Keep a shadow journal always accessible. When triggers arise during the day, note them immediately. Person's name, situation, your emotional response, physical sensations. Don't analyze yet. Just record data. Then before bed, dedicate 15 minutes to deeper examination. Review the day's triggers. Pick the one with strongest emotional charge. Write in stream of consciousness about it. Why did this person bother me so intensely? What quality in them provoked my reaction? When have I felt this way before? Keep writing until you reach insight. That moment when you recognize you're not upset with them, you're upset with yourself for suppressing the very trait you're judging in them. Dream work requires commitment, but yields profound results. Keep journal and pen within arm's reach of your bed. Set intention before sleep. I will remember my dreams and understand their messages. The moment you wake, before moving, before thinking, write everything you remember. Fragments are enough, even just emotional tone. Later, examine recurring symbols. Water represents emotions. Houses symbolize psyche. Dark figures often represent shadow. But don't rely on generic interpretations. Your unconscious speaks your personal language. What does that symbol mean to you specifically? Monthly active imagination sessions deepen shadow dialogue. Schedule uninterrupted time in private space. Enter meditative state through breathwork or progressive relaxation. Visualize inner sanctuary, somewhere you feel completely safe. Forest clearing, mountain cave, childhood bedroom, anywhere. Once grounded there, invite shadow aspect to appear. Don't control what emerges. Let it materialize however it wants. Animal, person, abstract shape, anything. Ask, what do you want me to know? Listen without judgment as response comes. Sometimes words, sometimes images, sometimes just emotional knowing. Have conversation. Thank this part for protecting you. Ask how you can work together now. Promise you won't exile it again. This isn't imagination. It's communication with disowned aspects of your psyche. Body practices move energy that talk therapy never touches. Your shadow lives in your tissues. Trauma stores in fascia, nervous system, cellular memory. Schedule weekly sessions of somatic release. Yoga, breathwork, ecstatic dance, somatic shaking. Any practice that bypasses intellectual control. As you move, emotions surface. Don't stop the process by analyzing. Keep moving. Let tears come. Let rage roar. Let grief pour out. Your body knows how to release what your mind has been trapping. Trust the process. The 3-2-1 process works best with someone who recently triggered intense response. Write about them in third person first. He is arrogant. She is manipulative. They are selfish. Feel the judgment flowing. Next, shift to second person. Address them directly. You are arrogant. You make me feel small. You trigger my insecurity. Feel the emotional charge intensifying. Finally, the moment of truth. First person. I am arrogant. I am manipulative. I am selfish. Sit with that. Notice the resistance. Notice the part of you that screams, "No, I'm not." That's your ego defending constructed identity. Stay present. Breathe. Find the truth underneath the defense. Yes, you are arrogant in certain contexts, manipulative when scared, selfish when protecting yourself. Owning this doesn't make you bad, it makes you whole. Integration requires self-compassion as final step. After owning shadow material, meet it with love. These rejected parts deserved acceptance all along. They were never evil, just young, scared, trying to keep you safe with limited tools. Place hand on your heart. Speak to your shadow as you would to frightened child. I see you. I accept you. I love you. You're safe now. You don't have to hide anymore. This isn't metaphorical. Neural pathways literally rewire when you offer yourself compassion instead of judgment. The internal war ends. And with it, the external chaos reflecting your inner fragmentation begins to calm. Forgiveness releases past's grip on present. You've identified shadow origins, childhood trauma, societal conditioning, religious shame, family dysfunction. Now forgive everyone involved, including yourself. Your parents operated from their own unintegrated shadows. Society perpetuates collective dysfunction unconsciously. You survived by fragmenting because integration wasn't available to you then, but it is now. Forgiveness doesn't condone harm. It releases your attachment to resentment that only continues harming you. Write forgiveness letters you never send. Speak forgiveness aloud in empty room. However it comes, let it come. Track your progress through reflection. Monthly, review journal entries. Notice patterns. Which triggers have decreased in intensity? Which shadow aspects have you successfully integrated? Where do you still feel resistance? Celebrate progress without judgment about what remains. Shadow work is lifelong practice. You don't complete it, you deepen it. Each layer revealed exposes another underneath. That's not failure. That's the infinite depth of human psyche. This is about you. Which practice will you start tomorrow morning? 10-minute meditation, shadow journal, dream work, body practice, active imagination. Pick one. Commit to 30 days. Notice what shifts. Your energy, your relationships, your internal experience. Becoming unstoppable means continuing this work, especially when resistance screams loudest. Because the power you denied lives in exactly those uncomfortable places you've been avoiding. And reclaiming your power requires you finally go there, stay there, integrate what you find, and emerge complete. Someone with beauty and broken pieces because you stopped performing wholeness and embodied it. Now comes the part that determines everything. You understand shadow work conceptually. You've learned practices. You've identified triggers. But knowing isn't transforming. The silence before the storm is that moment right before you commit to this process fully. Before you decide whether you'll actually do the work or just collect more information. Because shadow integration isn't intellectual accomplishment. It's spiritual practice, daily commitment, lifelong evolution. The medieval alchemists understood this. They spoke of turning lead into gold, but they weren't talking about actual metals. They meant transformation of the shadow, the heavy leaden aspects of your psyche, into integrated gold, top-quality psychic composting, taking what's rotten, rejected, buried, and through deliberate process, converting it into fertile ground for growth. That's not metaphor. That's the actual mechanism of shadow integration. By its very nature, shadow work is not fun or pretty. It takes courage and fortitude to see parts of your being that are not like you wish them to be. To look directly at your anger, jealousy, pride, selfishness, violence, all the qualities society labeled evil, and not just acknowledge they exist, but embrace them, integrate them, find their wisdom. You know this feeling. That resistance rising when you approach material you've been avoiding your entire life. Shadow work is exponentially easier when supported by experienced mentors and spiritual community. Not because you can't do it alone, but because your shadow operates in darkness. It thrives in isolation. When you bring shadow material into relationship, into the light of shared witnessing, it loses power to control you unconsciously. You need people who won't judge what you reveal, who've done their own shadow work, and can hold space for yours. Find them. Therapist, spiritual teacher, shadow work group, trusted friends walking the same path. Don't do this completely alone. Create your sacred space for this work. Your healing deserves dedicated ritual container. Not optional, essential. This might be quiet corner in your home with comforting objects like candle, crystal, incense, special chair where you journal and reflect, altar with meaningful items that inspire you, any space that feels peaceful and protected. When you enter this space, your psyche recognizes, we're doing the deep work now. That physical anchor helps you drop beneath surface consciousness where shadow lives. Daily practice is foundational for healing, growth, integration. Not weekly, not when you feel like it, daily. Your brain doesn't like anything new and will thwart changes you try to make. Starting small and staying consistent is how you actually transform. 5 minutes every morning beats hour-long sessions you abandon after 2 weeks. Sustainability matters more than intensity. The shadow integration practice works like this. Find quiet moment in your day, first thing in morning or right before bed. Light a candle, signal to your psyche that you're entering sacred time. Sit in silence for 5 to 10 minutes. Close your eyes and scan your internal landscape. What emotions are present? Where do you feel tension in your body? What thoughts are you avoiding? Don't judge what arises. Simply observe with curiosity. This conscious witnessing prevents shadow material from hijacking your day unconsciously. The mindful witness practice supports daily integration. Start with just 5 minutes a day. Notice when you're triggered or reactive. Pause and take conscious breath. Ask yourself, what's beneath this reaction? Write down any insights that arise. Over time, this practice builds muscle of self-awareness. You start catching yourself before unconscious reactions take over. That split second of awareness is where freedom lives. Dream work offers direct access to shadow aspects. Your dreams often show you what your conscious mind refuses to see. Keep journal beside bed. moment you wake, before your rational mind organizes the chaos, write everything you remember. Fragments are enough, even just emotional tone. Later, examine recurring symbols. Your unconscious speaks in metaphor. That dark figure chasing you, that's disowned power trying to catch you. The house with hidden rooms, unexplored aspects of your psyche. Don't rely on generic dream dictionaries. Your symbols mean what they mean to you specifically. Spiritual shadow work differs from traditional psychotherapy. Conventional therapy often views shadow through clinical lens, something to identify, process, integrate for symptom reduction and behavioral change. Spiritual shadow work, while honoring clinical insights, invites you to discover deeper meaning and purpose of your struggles. It recognizes your shadow contains soul wisdom, that pain shapes you not randomly, but purposefully. Your struggles aren't just problems to solve, they're portals for deep personal and spiritual growth. Traditional shadow work focuses on personal history and trauma processing. Goals center around functional improvement. Spiritual shadow work integrates personal healing with deeper meaning-making. Goals include both psychological integration and spiritual growth, alignment with soul purpose, conscious evolution, true holistic healing of mind, body, heart, and spirit. This is about you. Are you seeking just to function better, or to align with your deepest truth? Both are valid, but know which you're choosing. Shadow work addresses both psychological and spiritual dimensions simultaneously. You can't separate them. Trauma creates emotional blockages in your energy body and physical body. That stagnant energy contributes to inability to process trauma and keeps you stuck in repeating patterns. Utilizing energy work like Reiki, crystal healing, acupuncture, or physical movement therapies like somatic therapy, yoga, dance, these help realign emotional and physical bodies with mind. They shake loose stagnant energy that can then be processed through traditional therapy approaches. Integration is a lifelong process. We always evolve and learn new information in and about life. You don't complete shadow work and graduate. You deepen it. Each layer revealed exposes another underneath. That's not failure. That's the infinite depth of human psyche continually offering opportunities for wholeness. Shadow work is spiritual practice you use as you continue to evolve, grow, learn, integrate. As you dive into this sacred work, you'll start noticing subtle shifts. Triggers that used to derail you for days now process in hours. Patterns you've repeated your entire life suddenly become visible and optional. Relationships deepen as you stop projecting and start relating authentically. Creativity flows because energy previously spent maintaining the split returns for conscious use and your presence. Others sense something fundamental shifted in you. You radiate integration. Deep down, you know I'm right. This isn't about becoming perfect. It's about becoming whole. Accepting your anger, jealousy, pride, selfishness, all of it, not as defects to eliminate, but as energies to integrate. Your aggression channels into protection and assertion. Your selfishness becomes healthy boundaries. Your manipulation transforms into social intelligence used ethically. Nothing is wasted. Everything serves your evolution when consciously directed. The spiritual practice of shadow encourages you to make peace with parts of yourself you find despicable, unworthy, embarrassing. To unify dark and light. Take responsibility. Embrace your full humanity, not despite your darkness, but including it. Because only when you accept every part can you direct yourself with integrity. Becoming unstoppable means nothing controls you unconsciously anymore. Broken but unbreakable means you've integrated every fracture into superior architecture. Someone with beauty in broken pieces because you transformed lead into gold. Forged in suffering into someone whole.